On September 18th, U.S. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Franchetti presented a navigation plan for America's warfighting Navy at the Naval War College. It serves as the strategic guideline for the future of the U.S. Navy. Admiral Franchetti is the 33rd Chief of Naval Operations for the U.S. Navy, so the new plan is also referred to as the Project 33. The purpose of Project 33 is to prepare for potential conflict with China by 2027, strengthen the Navy's long-term superiority, and address challenges related to maintenance, recruitment, and readiness. Voice of America reported that Project 33 aims to integrate artificial intelligence and unmanned systems, while improving maintenance, training, and recruitment levels to maintain a combat edge in the Indo-Pacific region. The goal is to ensure that at least 80% of the Navy's ships, submarines, and aircraft are combat-ready on short notice. Admiral Franchetti acknowledged that this is a difficult target. The release of Project 33 has drawn significant Chinese media attention. They claim that China's recent launch of a DF-31AG intercontinental ballistic missile into the Pacific Ocean is what prompted U.S. concern and a rush to develop countermeasures. This was the first time in 44 years that China has launched an intercontinental ballistic missile towards the Pacific Ocean. Sohu, a Chinese state-affiliated media, commented that the U.S. Navy now faces only one real rival, China, because of its powerful naval capabilities. Sohu added that Russia, once considered the second military power, now has a naval force that is practically non-existent, as seen with the diminished Black Sea Fleet. Meanwhile, some Western media outlets have expressed concern over China's increasingly aggressive military actions in the Pacific, emphasizing that strengthening the U.S. Navy is now more urgent than ever. In October 2020, during the 5th plenary session of the 19th Central Committee, CCP leader Xi Jinping outlined the development of the military. He stated that 2027 will mark the centenary of the CCP's military and that plans should be made to accelerate the modernization of national defense and the armed forces before that. It implied preparations for a potential attack on Taiwan. By 2035, the goal is to fully modernize the military and by 2050 to establish it as a world-class military power. In March 2023, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken testified before Congress, agreeing with the CIA's assessment that the Chinese military would have the capability to invade Taiwan by 2027. However, after meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden at the end of 2023, Xi denied having a timeline for an attack on Taiwan. On March 20th of this year, Admiral John Aquilino, commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, testified before the House Armed Services Committee, stating that despite China's slowing economic growth, Beijing continues to actively build and modernize its military. The goal of achieving the capability to invade Taiwan by 2027 remains unchanged. Admiral Aquilino said, quote, "All indications point to the PLA meeting President Xi Jinping's directive to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027. The PLA's actions indicate their ability to meet Xi's preferred timeline to unify Taiwan with mainland China by force if directed." Unquote. He also noted that since 2020, the PLA has added more than 400 fighter jets and 20 major warships. Meanwhile, the number of ballistic and cruise missiles has doubled. China's military spending has increased by 16%, surpassing $223 billion. The long, uncontested dominance of the U.S. Navy is now facing pressure as China's state-owned shipbuilding industry rapidly expands, while the U.S. Navy struggles with ship maintenance delays. According to the Congressional Research Service, about one-third of the U.S. Navy's attack submarine fleet is currently out of service, either undergoing maintenance or awaiting repairs. Meanwhile, China, with 20 large shipyards, is quickly modernizing what is already the world's largest navy. The U.S. Department of Defense's 2022 China Military Power Report, released in November, revealed that the Chinese Navy surpassed the size of the U.S. Navy back in 2020. Analysis shows that as of now, the Chinese Navy has 370 ships and submarines, including over 140 major surface combat vessels. By 2024, China is expected to add 4 aircraft carriers, 6 ballistic missile submarines, 10 nuclear-powered attack submarines, and a total of 94 combat ships. The U.S. Navy's 2022 navigation plan indicated that its fleet has fewer than 300 ships. Even with a goal of reaching 350 manned ships by 2045, it will still lag far behind China. As China continues to build the largest navy in the world, Sam Tangredi, U.S. Naval War College professor and a former U.S. Navy captain, warned American military planners that in naval warfare, the larger fleet almost always wins. Tangredi pointed out that in 28 naval battles, from the Greco-Persian Wars to the Cold War, only 3 were won by technologically superior but smaller fleets. CNN reported that Pentagon leaders view China as a pacing threat to the U.S. military. However, in terms of fleet size, the U.S. Navy has been unable to keep up with the growth of China's Navy. Admiral Daryl Lane Caudill, commander of the U.S. Fleet Forces Command, has also called on the U.S. defense industry to ramp up production. General Caudill stated at a seminar in Washington that sufficient weaponry is crucial to victory. He stated that the United States is simultaneously dealing with competitors and potential adversaries, a situation never faced before. In December 2020, former four-star General Stanley McChrystal, who was then preparing to serve as President Biden's foreign and security advisor, expressed concern, stating that China's military power is growing at an unimaginable speed. In Project 33, Admiral Franchetti highlighted the Chinese Navy's challenge to the U.S. Navy goes beyond just the number and size of its warships. China is using multi-domain precision warfare, gray zone tactics, economic measures, expanding dual-use infrastructure like airports, deploying maritime militias, and continuously expanding its nuclear arsenal. This presents a, quote, multi-domain, multi-axis threat. The report assessed that to counter China's threats to U.S. allies, partners, and interests, and to achieve decisive victories when needed, a comprehensive plan must be developed to provide integrated, full-spectrum maritime control. To address this, the U.S. is turning to its allies, particularly Japan, one of the world's largest shipbuilding nations. Earlier this year, U.S. and Japanese officials began negotiating a plan to expand Japan's capacity to conduct major repairs on U.S. Navy vessels at its shipyards. As Japan moves away from decades of pacifist policies, it is taking a more active role in maintaining regional security. This is part of the U.S. strategy to encourage its Asian allies to take on more security responsibilities as China's influence grows. Reports suggest that Japan has historically maintained friendly relations with China to avoid provoking Beijing. However, with increasing military cooperation between China and Russia, especially efforts to alter the status quo in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea, Japan has reevaluated its approach. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Japanese public has become more aware of national security concerns, leading to stronger support for the US-Japan alliance and increased military involvement from Japan. In response to these concerns, some military analysts argue that naval strength can be assessed by 3 key metrics: tonnage, the number of large warships, and nuclear submarines. In August 2022, a BBC report compared the naval capabilities of China and the US, concluding that the US still maintains a strong lead in many areas of naval power. The US Department of Defense predicts that by the end of this decade, China's nuclear arsenal will be 4 times its current size. The report states that China will likely have at least 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. However, the US currently possesses 5,550 nuclear warheads, meaning China's nuclear stockpile remains far below that of the US. The US also has 11 aircraft carriers while China has only 3. The US Navy includes 68 nuclear-powered submarines, 22 cruisers, and 71 destroyers, surpassing the Chinese Navy not only in tonnage but also in overall combat capability. Since the Vietnam War in 1979, China has not been involved in any military conflict, meaning much of its military capability remains untested and it clearly lacks wartime experience. Some analysts have commented that even when combining the naval strength of all countries in the world, there is still a considerable gap compared to the US Navy. In addition to accelerating its weapons development, China's actions in other areas have also drawn significant global attention. On March 1, 2023, China officially implemented the Law on Reserve Personnel, which states that reserve personnel are members of the National Armed Forces and serve as an important source of reinforcements for active duty forces in wartime. Chinese military expert Song Zhongping told Voice of America that China's reserve forces cover all branches of the military. He said that the focus is on regional hotspots related to China's national security, including the Taiwan Strait, the South China Sea, and the China-India border. These are the key areas of concern. A former assistant professor at Taiwan's National Defense University and our researcher at Taiwan's CCP Research Magazine, Dr. Yang Taiyuan, commented that the purpose of the reserve personnel law is to hide troops among civilians, masking the CCP's ambitions to expand its military. Yang explained that this is essentially a form of covert military expansion aimed at fulfilling Xi Jinping's requirements to be prepared for war. The CCP does not publicly disclose the number of reserve troops, but Young estimated that by 2027, the reserve force could exceed 7.3 million, with 1.8 million in active reserve units making up the core of the reserve force. Director of Taiwan's Institute for National Defense and Security Research, Su Zuyuan, estimated that China's reserve force is likely larger, given its vast population, and could exceed 14 million when including militia forces. Su added that if a conflict breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, amphibious landings would be a key battle. However, Taiwan's defense strategy in the Taiwan Strait, East China Sea, and South China Sea is focused on air and naval defense. Taiwan would rely on air defense missiles and anti-ship missiles to form a primary defensive network against the potential CCP invasion. In such a scenario, China's reserve personnel would likely serve as logistical reinforcements or form second-line units to defend after the main forces have been deployed, with some also supporting frontline combat tasks. China's law on reserve personnel is widely viewed as a preparation for a potential invasion of Taiwan. China's law on reserve personnel is widely viewed as a preparation for a potential invasion of Taiwan. China is also heavily investing in developing intelligent warfare, focusing on disruptive technologies, especially future combat methods that involve artificial intelligence. The U.S. Department of Defense has stated that China's Academy of Military Science has been instructed to achieve its goals through military-civil fusion, which involves integrating private tech companies with China's defense industry. Reports suggest that China may already be using artificial intelligence in military robots, missile guidance systems, as well as drones and unmanned naval vessels. According to a recent expert assessment, China has also launched extensive cyber operations abroad. In July of this year, the UK, the US, and the EU accused China of carrying out a major cyber attack on Microsoft Exchange servers. This attack is believed to have affected at least 30,000 organizations globally, aiming to conduct large-scale espionage, including the theft of personal data and intellectual property. Meanwhile, the frequently joint military activities between China and Russia have prompted defensive responses from the US. In September, during a visit to Japan, U.S. Coast Guard Pacific Area Commander Vice Admiral Andrew Tiongson noted that Alaska shares a maritime boundary with Russia's Far East region. Tiongson said that there has been an increase in the presence of Chinese and Russian warships in this Pacific area, and occasionally they enter the U.S. exclusive economic zone. He explained that their responses to the adversary's presence is to ensure a visible presence. Wherever the adversary appears, they make sure the adversary is aware of their presence. At times, they do not engage directly, but instead monitor and track their movements. At the same time, the USS Preble DDG-88, a destroyer equipped with the latest Helio laser weapon system, departed from San Diego and headed to Yokosuka, Japan, the home port of the US 7th Fleet. The USS Preble is the only one of the US Navy's 73 Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers equipped with high-energy laser weapons capable of shooting down drones and missiles. In response to the increasing Chinese and Russian naval activities near Alaska's coast, the US military is steadily bolstering its presence in the region. The US has deployed an additional destroyer and an Army unit equipped with long-range missile systems. It has been stationed on a remote island in Alaska, and fighter squadrons and other aircraft based in Alaska are now on high alert. US military and defense officials are increasingly concerned that as China and Russia strengthen their ties, they may try to challenge Western unity and ultimately shift the balance of power on the global stage. U.S. Indo-Pacific Commander Admiral John Aquilino told members of the House Armed Services Committee that the growing relationship between Beijing and Moscow is a major factor in making the current environment the most dangerous he has seen in his 40 years of service. Aquilino described the relationship between China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran as an emerging axis of evil. U.S. military officials are also concerned that this growing alliance seems to be emboldening North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. General Paul LaCamera, commander of the U.S. Forces Korea, noted that Kim Jong-un now has the opportunity to test some of his technologies on the battlefield alongside the Russians. This includes not only his missile technology but also his artillery and other systems. At a House Armed Services Committee hearing in March this year on the U.S. military posture and challenges in the Indo-Pacific region, Committee Chairman Mike Rogers stated, quote, "China's extraordinary military buildup is certainly concerning, but what's most alarming is the increasingly provocative actions she has taken in recent years, pushing out China's borders with new defense agreements and military bases in foreign nations, threatening our allies in the region with reckless ship and aircraft intercepts, and attempting to coerce Taiwan with military exercises and near-daily airspace incursions simulating an invasion of the island. We have no choice but to take Xi's threats seriously," unquote. Assistant Secretary of Defense Eli Retner emphasized that China continues to pose the most comprehensive and serious challenge to the U.S. He stressed that preventing conflict in the Indo-Pacific has always been a top priority for the U.S., adding that conflict in the region is neither imminent nor inevitable.